modification, which would be an essential function for your vehicle sale at the agency. People modify their behavior for a number of reasons. It could be to lose weight, also quit smoking. What we deal with here is people who exhibit problematic or maladaptive behavior that needs to be changed to an appropriate and safer expression. But before we can get too far into how we modify or change behavior, we need to talk about what is behavior. We can define behavior in having two components. Behavior must be measurable, and it must be observable. Measurable so that the four of us in this room, if we all saw someone pick up that cup of coffee, we can see it because they did it, drinking their coffee. We also have to be able to count and measure it in some way. How long did they drink that coffee? How many sips did they take? Okay, that type of thing. What time did they drink the coffee? We need to really get some information. So in the plans that you'll see, the behavior plans that you'll be working with, you'll see behaviors with that operational definition, what you're going to see and how you're going to measure it. Okay, you'll see things like assault, aggression, self-injurious behavior that we've identified that those are the behaviors we're looking for. You're not going to have to guess as to what behaviors you're looking for, because under aggression it will say acts of hitting, kicking, biting, specific, so that it's not left to the individual person. You're going to have something to go by. So something that's a common phenomenon that we might see is when somebody reacts to something that we can't see or we can't hear, and we might call that a hallucination. But would that be behavior? We can't measure it, we can't observe a hallucination, so that would not be behavior. But how they respond to it would be. And it's something to think about because you may encounter that on the job. Once we've identified behaviors that we're going to target in the plan, because behavior is everything that we do. Okay? We can't target every behavior that someone does. There are millions of behaviors. So we target only a select few that are truly problematic or adaptive. We need to next find out what is the function, what is the reason behind those behaviors before we go about trying to change them, because depending on the function, why the person exhibits that behavior, we're going to need to use different strategies to try to modify it. Some of the most common functions, reasoning, and this is not limited to just the population that we work with. This is behavior, depending, doesn't matter who you are. We deal with probably four functions of behavior. The first one being attention. Okay, many of us might, on a Friday night, might go to the club, go someplace nice and wear nice clothes, and, go someplace where there's going to be a lot of people because we want that attention. So people that we support have learned inappropriate ways to get attention. They go up to the institutions, and the only way to get attention was to steal your neighbor's food. If there's one staff to 30 individuals, it's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. So we learned the maladaptive way to get the attention. Another is escape. And you want to escape and avoid something that's undesirable. Okay, incidents. It could be a chore. It could be a staff person that they don't like. So they might. But they may, or a task that they don't want to do. So by hitting someone, then they might have a timeout, and then they'll be removed from a situation that they don't want to be in, or a person they don't want to be in. The third is a tangible object, and that's just any physical thing. We might, in that talk, we might say we call it stealing. Taking things that don't belong to us is usually what you'll see on the job. That coffee is not intended, it's quite desirable, something you take it. Okay, it's just the desire to have a thing. Okay. We all, most of us in the world are motivated by one very specific tangible item, which is money. Okay. It's something which many of us have to do with those obligations, and we want to buy nice things. I want to buy the nice clothes so that Friday back you can go out and get attention. The last major one that we have, and this is not inclusive, every possible motivation, these are the most common ones. The last is a sensory stimulation. And that's a behavior that's exhibited just for the sensation which it causes, which you can imagine, sex, masturbation. And also people with autism spectrum disorders who do a lot of stereotypical behavior and blocking, rubbing their ears. It's just purely for the sensation which it causes. Even some instances of self-injurious behavior where somebody might bite themselves or they might hit their head on the wall. It could be just for that sensation that it causes, especially for the senses adult and they need that strong form of physical contact to feel anything. The person could also be influenced, motivated by, again, internal stimuli, what we call hallucinations, voices that they're hearing, things that they're seeing. And the last major one is communication. When you can't communicate your wants and your needs, you may learn ways to get your needs met, which could be in an appropriate way. You can imagine you have individuals who are deaf and staff who are hearing who can't sign. Okay, so something simple as I'm hungry or I'm tummy ache. If the staff don't understand them, you can see inappropriate behaviors to that frustration and not be able to get the wants and needs met. When we're looking at behaviors and we're looking at specifically new behaviors that are now adaptive and problematic, it's important to note the antecedent to that behavior. Okay? We just talked about the functioning. You see that all behavior happens for a reason because of that motivation and that functioning component to it. But we want to note the events that happen prior to the behavior. If we can identify those situations like it's time to go to the dentist and when it is time for the dentist, Frank hits his house. And we know that the antecedent is going to the dentist. If we're hungry, we're going to go get something to eat. So the antecedent condition to eating is hunger. If you're threatened by someone, might punch them. The antecedent to that aggressive act and hitting was feeling threatened. But we can identify that. A lot of times we can plan, program around those situations that are difficult. Like someone who does not like to be in crowds. But we're not going to bring them to the rally at the State House when there's 1,000 people. Right? We can avoid those situations. Another for you as staff people, something very important to understand is this notion called extinction burst. Because as we change someone's behavior, and they have a motivation, they have something they want. They've learned the appropriate ways to access those things. So, say if I wanted Katie's attention, I'd bang on holding real high. I say, oh, Frank's going to hurt his hands. Katie's not going to give him attention anymore if he bangs the desk. Well, I'm going to think, that's Frank. Are they stupid? This is how I do this. They are supposed to give me attention. So the extinction burst is after we target the behavior will actually get worse until it gets better. That extinction burst is just a expectation. When you're reading the plans and you follow the plans, you say, wow, Frank, it's a horrible plan. This behavior got worse. You know it will. As the individual who learns how to access their motivation, what it is that they want. So we identify the behavior, we know the motivation behind it, and that's important because you can expect it. If the person is motivated by escape, we're not going to, they don't want to do the dishes, so they break them. We're not going to remove them from the situation so that they get what they want, because now we're reinforcing that. Now they know every time it's time to do the dishes, they don't have to break them, because that's what we're teaching them. It's okay, you break the dishes, you don't have to do it anymore. So that's why it's important to know the functioning, the reason behind the behavior, before we can now shape it or replace it. If we don't know the functioning, we run the risk of, if we try to replace the behavior, we're going to actually make the behavior worse. Shaping, replacing behavior, we can't just squash a behavior. Frank brings to the table, we're going to just not let Frank ever bring the table. So obviously I want somebody's attention. I'm going to still want that attention. If you tie my hands down to my waist, I'm still going to want that attention. That want is not going to go away. So we can't just squash it because then you will see Because if abandoned, now I'm taking it to you and I'm throwing it to you. It's going to get worse. So we look at reinforcement, looking at the issue, finding out what the problem point is, where the behavior starts. Or maybe it might have given somebody less amounts of work and frequent reinforcement to get them through staff, intervention staff helping them do the project, giving them reinforcement with this stuff. This is going to vary depending on the skill that we're working on and the person who is who we're working with. It's just unfortunate that we're not just squashing the behavior, we are replacing it or shaping it from its current form to a safer. So we do this with reinforcement, reinforcer. You've heard the term reinforcer before. You can't just go to Costco and buy a big bag of Oreos and say this is the reinforcer for this program. Because reinforcers only reinforces if they increase the behavior in which they follow. That's it. We have very little input on that as staff or as a clinician. I can't tell someone this is your reinforcer. If it doesn't increase their behavior that it follows, it's not a reinforcer. That's important. So reinforcers need to be delivered as specified in the behavior plan. Typically immediately following the desired behavior. The person may have very limited cognitive function, but if they exhibit whatever the behavior is that they're looking for, they get the reinforcer right away. And so maybe they can use it together. Some people are able to go longer. You might see contracts where they have a good day, and during the day they receive a reinforcer. And in a week, they can take a month all the way, especially trip out. Some people even a month out. It really depends on the functional level of the person you're working with. Everything is very specific. You don't try to apply this all to a group of people. Very specific to each individual. The opposite of a reinforce is what we call a decelerative procedure. And this is if you want the behaviors that it follows to decrease. Depending on the state that you're in, this is going to be outlined in the regulations from the state. We're very limited to what we can use as a decelerative procedure, which is why it's important that you follow the behavior plans, because we are following the regulations when we have a time-bound procedure, which is moving people's attention. Overcorrection. If you ever your dad caught you smoking a cigarette and said, "Oh, you want to smoke?" and gives you a whole pack, and if you smoke the whole pack, probably don't get that as much anymore as you used to. Overcorrection. There's certain very specific procedures that we can use, but you're going to follow the behavior plan to what goes on. Okay, it's very important that you don't make up your own consequences for behavior. If you're not all on the same page, so you have different interventions, it's not going to work. Okay. Behavior is measurable, and you will need to measure it. You're going to most likely you're going to use a frequency count. So whatever the behaviors are on the plan, if it's aggression, self-abuse behavior, whatever it is, you're going to count it how many times it happens. And the frequency count is the most often used form of data collection. You also have interval counts, which are just more of a yes and no. This behavior happened between 8 and 8:30, 8:30 and 9:30. I do use those every now and then. Some plans, but it is mostly a frequency count. The last concept for this behavior modification is to know that we have a duty to fade, a responsibility to fade. A behavior plan that was written in 2000 is not intended to be with this person until the die. The behaviors have been reduced, and they've been at 0 for a year, 2 years, whatever it may be for the person. We want to discontinue the plan to remove those restrictions in place on the person.